Churches should encourage parents in their congregations to have their children vaccinated.
I agree, but it's not enough. It's time to mandate vaccinations.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you, Mark, and I am also very glad you've decided to join us for today's program. We're looking forward to this discussion. It's a very important one. You've been hearing about it in the news and on various talk shows. Today, we're going to discuss it around this table. But before we get started, I'd like for you to meet our panelists. Let's begin with the lady to my right.
My name is Andrea Luxton. I'm president of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, and I'm canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. Our congregation is a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
I'm Mel Robeck. I am an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God, and I serve my church at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California, as Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics and Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval. I'm the Richard J. Dinda Professor of Lutheran Identity and Mission at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I serve as Senior Pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship.
Well, thank you very much, each one of you, for being here today, and again for your joining us for today's program. Straight out of the headlines it is, a recent report states that the number of parents not vaccinating infants has quadrupled in the last 17 years. And the consequences are serious. From 2016 to 2017, the cases of measles in Europe has jumped from 5,273 cases to 21,315, causing public health concerns. Closer to home, here in the state of Minnesota, they saw a serious measles outbreak among its Somali community last year. Sadly, Christian parents are among those who do not vaccinate their children. Among the arguments heard by Christians who oppose vaccinating are the following. First, there are links between vaccines and autism. Another thing you hear is vaccines use cells from aborted fetuses. And then a third one, vaccines are an extension of a government control over the family. And then there's another one. Measles were already on the decline when the vaccine was introduced in 1963. And yet another one we hear is this. Due to herd immunity, that's the term, parents can keep their children healthy without vaccines and not expose them to harm. That's according to Christianity Today, May 5, 2015. Numerous secular and Christian sources, including Christianity Today, have refuted all of these reasons as ungrounded. In fact, Justin Smith of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention argues that there are three fundamental reasons Christians should vaccinate their children. First, Smith says, Christians should vaccinate because science confirms the effectiveness and safety of vaccinations. Second, he says, Christians should vaccinate because they love their neighbors. Vaccinations not only maintain the health of one's own children, but it also is best for the children of other parents who are in contact with their children. And then finally, Smith says this, Christians should vaccinate because they refuse to give into fear-mongering. He says Christians seek out accurate information, receive wise counsel, and then act in trust of God's providence today. We want to ask our panelists about these particular issues. And the first question I would like them to consider is this. How do the panelists respond to the reasons Christians give for refusing vaccinating their children? Are there any legitimate reasons for refusing these vaccinations? The second question, should the government coerce vaccinations for all children living in its jurisdiction? And then finally, what response should the church have to this growing health issue? That is the topic for today. Let's go back to the panelists. We'll start with the ones who helped us to begin the program, and that is Dr. Mel Robeck, and glad to have you here today.
Thank you.
Some more thoughts on your opening remark, please.
Yeah, I think it's really significant that there are people in the United States, in a relatively first world kind of a country, with great medical care available and vaccinations available to everyone, that we have so much trouble in thinking that these kinds of things would be helpful. I think part of our problem is that we do not deal with death very well, and we do not remember having ever lived through a pandemic. 1918 was the last pandemic that we saw in the world, where 50 million people died from the Spanish flu. Almost a million of them, or at least 2/3 of a million of them, were in the United States. That was a very scary time for a lot of people, but they don't see those kinds of numbers today. We are looking at 3,000, 5,000, 2,000, 1,000. These are relatively small numbers by comparison. But in reality, disease has taken millions and millions of lives. I was reading just recently that in the Americas, when the Europeans came to the Americas, 59 million people died as a result, and the vast majority of them were due to diseases for which they had no ability to respond. And so I'm very thankful that we have vaccinations. If you think about the number of people who died from polio and yellow fever and even measles, in 1990, 630,000 people died from measles. In 2011, 158,000 people died from measles, largely because they didn't have the ability to receive vaccinations. It's also the case that when we think about smallpox, in 1967, there were still 15 million people who died from smallpox simply because they did not have that vaccination. Now, one of the interesting things to me is that the first vaccinations that took place in the United States were not done by medical professionals, they were done by a preacher. Cotton Mather was a Puritan preacher, and he was very interested in science, and he began experiments with his cows. And he realized that the pox that the cows had was somewhat similar to what people had, and he began to develop what became the first vaccines for smallpox. It has saved millions of lives. Instead of people saying back, as they did back then, well, this is God's punishment on the people of Boston or whatever for so many people dying, today we can look at it and say, no. God invented the science that makes it possible for us to find a way to maneuver past this so that we can face life in a much better way. So when people say, oh, I don't want to vaccinate my child because there's this chance that something bad might happen to them, I want to say you owe it to yourself to do so, and you owe it to your neighbor to do so, because vaccines today are by far the most safe and effective way to approach disease.
Well, thank you, Dr. Robeck. Down the table, we go to Dr. Trovall. You also helped to start the program today. You think it's time for the government to say everybody does it?
I think so, and it's mostly because death and sickness are tragic, but preventable sickness and death, I think, is unconscionable. And I really have a hard time understanding why one would want to put their own child at a significant risk, and not only their own child, but other children as well, well, Mel put it very well in laying out all the statistics. These numbers are real people. And my wife and I were talking the other day about these poor kids who have measles. I mean, it could have been avoided, and the parents are hurting. But it's like, well, you made the decision not to immunize, and I frankly have it's just hard for me to look at that. And I do think that the purpose of government is to protect the innocent, and here we have innocent people who are being harmed by something that is really, for the most part, absolutely safe.
Now, there might be some who say that that infringes on freedom of will and the exercise of your own individuality and conscience and what have you.
Of course it does, because
yes.
We're always at tension between the common good and individual freedom. And I think in this case, individual freedom loses in the interest of the common good.
And public safety is what you're saying, yes. And then, Tom, welcome back to the program. You also want to say something about this subject.
Yeah,
Yes.
I find this far more like laws regulating speed on highways.
Yeah.
In terms of negative consequences and in terms of government coercion and so forth, than some people want to paint it. I think any medication has reactions. There are dangers related to any medication that you take. You just read the labels, listen to the commercials and the fine print that they say real fast at the end of it. Every medicine that there is, there's a reaction to it from some people. But serious vaccine side effects are very, very, very rare. And the overall benefit to your children's school, your children's the teams that they're on, the church that they go to, every place your child goes is helped when you immunize your children.
All right, thank you. Dr. Matthews, where do you fall down on this or come down on this?
Real simple, yes, I think everyone should vaccinate their children in general, Christians in particular. I will quickly say, in addition, that I don't know if all of this is conspiratorial theorizing when it comes to vaccinating the kids or not vaccinating the kids. I think there may be some legitimate concerns out there with parents. Having spoken with several people, one person brought to my attention the 1986 Act, the Childhood Vaccine Injury Act in 1986 that was passed, and the person brought to my attention that vaccinations have become very profitable, and that act prevented these companies from being sued. Now, again, I want to say again that I think people should vaccinate their children. I mean, period. I do believe, though, that every child is different, as we've heard. It's very rare for something negative to happen, but when you have a parent or two or three who have experienced some negativity, adverse effects with vaccinations, I think we should kind of understand their concerns. Lastly, if this information is correct, I have no reason to believe it's not. But 1962, there was a total doses of 5 vaccinations required. In 1983, it went to 24, and in 2016, it required 72 doses. So I just think that is pretty interesting, and I'm definitely totally against the government mandating. I just, I think we ought to do it, but government mandating folks to give their kids shots, wow, that's kind of scary to me.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Luxton, your thoughts on the subject?
I just don't comprehend the position not to vaccine. I don't know, maybe it was just the backwards of England, but when I grew up, there were vaccines for some things, but not others. Measles was one of the things for which there was not vaccine. And basically, my parents, along with most parents, if there was someone up the road with measles, they'd send us up to visit.
Yes.
Because they'd say, way better for you to get measles now than for you to get it when you're older. And so, yeah, we would go up there and go through all the childhood things. I think with my measles, I only got two things on me, so I did pretty well. But that was just how it was. And frankly, I'd much rather have had a vaccine than be sent up the road to catch the measles. And so you wonder whether sometimes those making the decisions now for their children didn't have that experience. Yeah. So they don't have that thing to compare. When I look at the Bible, I don't see anything that says you should not take the wisdom of the scientists into account, or whatever the equivalent is. It's just not there. There's just nothing biblical that I can see that says we should not take advantage of the best science, the best medicine, and the best wisdom. And I think that's what we need to do. Yes, I think there need to be certain levels of controls by the government to make sure we don't over-vaccinate for everything and so on, and just build that up. But I lean towards the legislation side. I really do. Because I do think that it's an issue not just for that individual, but for society as a whole. And I think that's where the government has a responsibility. It shouldn't just be a personal decision.
All right, thank you. Canon Peterson, your thoughts, please.
Well, Andrea has helped segue to one of the things I wanted to speak about, and that is the biblical perspective. And I'm in total agreement. Vaccines were not created at the time of the biblical narrative. So there's no reference whatsoever in the scripture in relationship to getting a vaccine. However, the scripture is also very much concerned about preserving health and life, particularly cleanliness. Cleanliness is one of the major issues in the Hebrew codes in particular. And that, well, God created human beings not only in God's likeness and image, but God's mental likeness as well. And so I think that the scripture does have a strong thing to say in relationship to health, in relationship to how one lives their lives. And I think that many of the codes in the Old Testament, for example, certainly point this out. But at this point here, I think it's also important to realize that amongst the Christian community, and in particular the religious community, the number of vaccine refusals is increasing. The number of Christians who are refusing to receive vaccine is increasing. And that, of course, creates a lot of the problems which each one of you has presented this morning. There are 3 churches that actually are on record as opposing vaccines. One is a Church of Christ Scientists, the Christian Scientists, of course, the Dutch Reformed congregations, and that actually surprised me when reading that, as well as faith healing denominations, which include Faith Temple, Church of the Firstborn, Faith Assembly, and End Time Ministries. And so these particular churches actually have a stipulation against receiving it. In the Episcopal Church, we have no specific scriptural canonical references to the use of vaccines. It's interesting that in the Roman Catholic Church, their one concern is expressed about aborted fetal tissues, and that becomes an issue for them in relationship to vaccines. But this is certainly a critical issue. And I want to end what I'm saying at this point to Dr. Neil Halsley, who is a pediatrician and director of the Institute for Vaccine Safety at Johns Hopkins University, one of the leading hospitals, of course, in the United States. And Dr. Halsley wrote, "Vaccines do have risks, but our brain has a hard time putting the risk into perspective."
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Trovol, if there was a government regulation, should there be a religious carve-out for that? Or is it just, there are no exceptions?
No, there always has to be exceptions in the context of, I mean, I get frightened about religious freedom because religious freedom doesn't extend to the harm of your children. And so that's why I certainly be concerned, but obviously there are people who are at risk for whatever reason where this would be actually possibly tremendous harm. And so, yeah, there have to be exceptions for that. It wouldn't be a blanket mandate. I'm just saying that it should not be left up to individual freedom, and that's that.
So that takes me back to Dr. Matthews. Dr. Matthews, if there were government regulations about mandatory vaccination with carve-outs, would you be accepting of that? Would you be in favor of that with religious carve-outs?
I certainly would be open to looking at it.
Well, again, we're hearing two sides.
I understand. I just I don't know, just instinctively for some reason when government mandates a population to do something, it bothers me.
But it seems that everyone is in agreement that it's a good thing to get vaccinated.
Without a doubt. Get vaccinated.
Agreement on that? Yes, Reverend Plumley, you're good with this?
To pay taxes too. I want to go back to the Bible.
We just have a few seconds.
A few seconds. Yeah. I'll just take a few seconds to go to the Bible and say that the dietary laws and the cleanliness laws that are in Scripture were directly related to the need for personal hygiene, personal health, and public health. That's where they came from.
Amen.
God just directly told them because they didn't understand microbiology in those days, but the Creator did. Dr. Lexton, any further thoughts? We do have 30 seconds left.
No, I mean, I would say that as far as the Bible is concerned, there's nothing that says we shouldn't vaccine. So let's do it.
All right, sounds like pretty much everyone is in agreement for the most part. Dr.
I would say
Robick?
carve-outs are still problematic for me because they're exploited by people,
Yes.
especially people
Yes.
who are fearful.
Oh, we'll have to do a whole different program on that one, but thank you very much for pointing that out. That's all the time we have for this segment. There is an important announcement I'd like for you to stand by to listen to. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome back, everyone. I do look forward to hearing from you. Agree or disagree, that's part of the fun and the experience of this program, I guess, or the importance of the program, to be sure. So write a letter. You can go to the email from the website and send us an email there, or you can view past programs at the archives as well. They are there for your viewing pleasure. We're going to go now to our summations, and we'll begin with Dr. Luxton. You're first.
One of the phrases that is very important to me is that concept of do no harm. And that's not as soft as it may seem, because doing no harm may involve some conflicts. And I think for parents who think that vaccination is going to do harm, I think the issue is, yes, but much greater harm is done when we do not do this. It's danger to your own child, danger to the community at large. And I think the biblical position would be, we have to go beyond just the small thing that we're seeing to see something bigger.
Thank you. Reverend Plumley, your summation, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I like Dr. Luxton, as a child, when my sister would bring home things from school, preschooler was put right up next to her to make sure I got it, because I invariably got a milder case of it. The simple fact is that one of the greatest public health advances in the 20th century has been immunizations and vaccinations. That advance, however, is being eroded strangely in the 21st century, and almost always that's about fear. And we need to refuse to give in to fear in all its forms.
All right, thank you. Dr. Trovall, your summation.
I've articulated the moral argument about the common good and, as you've said, do no harm. But let's just let's just talk money. It's so much cheaper to vaccinate than to take care of someone who has the measles, and in terms of the burden on our healthcare system. So even from that perspective, it seems like a wise choice.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Dr. Matthews.
Yes, and to all those who are out there who have that fear, we want to encourage you to put that aside, vaccinate your children. The science is firm, the benefits outweigh the risk, and we'll be praying for you guys.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Dr. Robeck, your summation.
Yes, as a minister with the Assemblies of God, you know that this is a Pentecostal denomination, and we do believe that God heals today. He's not going to necessarily heal in the way we want him to, and not at all times. The healing is up to God. But the reality is that we do think that God has also sent us healers in the scientific community as well. So I would say that needs to be said alongside this idea of divine healing, which I believe in with all my heart. Secondly, I think social media has not helped us here. People spread their worries and their fears and their gossip and everything along, and as a result, people get caught up in the fear factor. A third point is the question of the cost of vaccines, and the cost of any kind of medication today is horrendous. Almost all of the major medications that people need are horrendous. I had to get a vaccination to go to Ghana last year for yellow fever. It cost me $160. That's a lot of money. When I got to Ghana, there were people who didn't have that, and they paid $20 in Ghana for the same vaccine. So, you know, somebody's making money along the way. Somebody's making a lot of money, and maybe it's even our 401ks that are doing that. I don't know. But I think we need to be aware of all of these things, and still, it's important to get our kids vaccinated.
Thank you very much, and yet another program in the making. Thank you. And now Canon Peterson, your summation, please.
Yes, I want to just give one very interesting statistic that Neil Helsley, that I referred to earlier, had made. The risk of any serious allergic reaction to any vaccine is 1 in 1 million vaccines. So the slightness of this is enormous. I don't think we can deny that the rise of anti-vaccine is rising in this country, and certainly within the religious community. And I have a question I want to ask the religious community when they take such a stand. The question is whether or not religious freedom is a threat to public health.
Good question. It will probably not remain rhetorical. We'll probably come back to that, or maybe a viewer might like to write us a letter and tell us what they think about that. And again, that's what this program is about. It's agree or disagree. And today we've had mostly agreement for the most part, and then some caveats woven in here and there, and that is a good thing. Now, certainly, this calls for some very important research. If you have questions about this, we would suggest you talk with your pediatrician, your doctor, someone in whom you have confidence regarding your health care. Have that conversation with them. Take a look at the information that is available. We'd mentioned social media earlier. What could also be a help rather than just a hurt is going to the web pages and reading, but reading with discretion and making sure you check with your medical providers to get the very best information you can. I think we all agree we all want to be healthy, and I was one of those who was taken to the cousin's house when they had spots appear on them, and I would come home with my own then. Today that might be considered something else in terms of parenthood, and maybe, well, you said it, maybe it is, but yet another program. We'll come back to that perhaps as well. But for now, the charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.